Today on JiK Labs, we dive a little bit deeper, yet again, into the pivot table. Let's get started. Now that you have Excel open and ready to go, you're going to see we are about where we left off last week with our JiK Labs pivot table showing here on the screen. A couple things we wanted to talk to you about today is we showed you how to make, from our original data, a pivot table. But on your insert ribbon of Microsoft Excel, if you click beside that and say recommended pivot tables, it brings up a new window that we have yet to explore. And you can see it gives you pretty much, it's like a little wizard. It shows you what it could be. We have sum of cost, sum of sales, sum of GP dollars, so on and so forth. It gives you several examples that you can use. For right now, we'll just do sum of sales. Also, you can down below create a blank pivot table and start from scratch like we showed you all how to do over the last few videos. And you can also change your data source. If we click on that, that brings up a new window allowing us to change our data. But like we said before, we were selected inside the confines of our data, so it's automatically selected it all for us. So we're just going to hit OK. Template comes back up. We'll select sum of sales, and this is a preview of what it looks like. We'll go ahead and click OK. And then we can see down below we have sheet 3 with all of our sales for our data. Again, nothing's been formatted or anything because we did all that over here on this sheet. So keep that in mind. You can either, on your insert ribbon, start from scratch or click on recommended pivot tables. And if you do that, you can still start with a blank pivot table. So the choice is yours. The recommended pivot tables or templates, if you wanted to call them that, will help you get going, but you can still modify and change them however you like because all of the pivot table fields and everything is over here for you. So let's go back to our one that we've been working on. So now what we want to do is we want to get a little bit better look at what's going on here. So we have all of this information. So I guess we could say Alice and come back to our original data, select Alice in our auto filter and see all that information that way. But there's another feature built into the pivot table that makes your life a little bit easier. So let's jump back over. And right now, let's just say we double click on Alice. We got a new window that popped up. What is that telling us? It says show detail. It says we can add more fields. So what do we want to do? Let's add in invoice number and click OK. And now we can see Alice expanded. We can see all the invoice numbers of the sales that Alice had. And it has carried it through for all of the salespeople. And if we look on the lower right hand side, we can see in rows we have invoice number. Again, we want to get that. We just click and drag that guy out and it reverts back to us. So you can also, while you're in your pivot table, if you double click, it'll pop up that window. And of course, you can always use your pivot table fields on the right hand side, or you can put in the slicers as we showed you last week in part 3, which is up over here. So let's say we want to look at Alice's sales a little bit more in depth. Again, I said we could go back to original data and sort through it that way, or from our pivot table, if we were to double click on Alice's sales, it brings up, as you can see, sheet 4, a new sheet in our workbook, and it made a table of that data. So now we can see it has brought it all over. It is telling us all of the invoice numbers, pretty much all of the information that we put into the range of our pivot table has shown up over on this sheet. So we can rename this and call it Alice Sales, or we could right click and delete it. And it's going to say, are you sure? And we're going to say yes, because that data is just a summary sheet that the pivot table has made for us. Again, if we come in here and double click on Robert, we'll see the same thing. Sheet 5 has now popped up and we're seeing all of the information from Robert's sales. Again, can rename or delete, but since this is nothing more than an example, we're going to go ahead and delete that for now. Now, I know we have in our data GP dollars. Now, let's assume this is not in our data. Well, I want to see that on our report because I want to see how much profit dollars Alice has made off of her $39,000 in sales. So how would we do that? Well, we could go to our original data and do the math as we've done here, and then we could change our data source on our pivot table, but the pivot table has a feature that allows you to add new fields and formulas into this for us. So select somewhere within the confines of your pivot table and go up to Pivot Table Analyze. And on about the rightish side of the screen, you're going to see Fields, Items, and Sets. Click on that guy. You're going to get a down drop, and we want to say Calculated Fields. We click on that, and it brings up a new window. And we're going to look at it right here. Let's move me out of the way. And we're going to call this Calc Commission. And down below, we're going to see some things. So we're going to see sales amount. We're going to click on the field that we want, and then we'll say Insert Field. And it brings it up. And then we're going to do minus, because we're calculating GP dollars. And it's going to be Cost. Insert Field. And if you just stop here, you haven't done anything. So we want to click Add. So what we're going to do is go ahead and click OK. And now we're back to our pivot table, and we can see the sum of commissions is what we've entered. But how does that compare with our actual GP dollars fields that we made? So let's select that and add it to values. And now that we've added in the data from our original data of the sum of the GP dollars, we can see that our equation works perfectly and we have them matching. Of course, you would never do this field again because it was already in the original data, but if you didn't, you could add that field in that function to further grow your pivot table. So what we're going to do right now is delete this guy. And again, if we were to double click on any of these sums, we get the data as we got before of the summary of all of Jack's data or whomever's numbers we clicked on. So we'll delete that guy out and we're going to go back to our data. So let's say you've built a very comprehensive pivot table and you don't remember what equations you've built into your pivot table. So once again, you click back into the center of your data on your pivot table and go to Pivot Table Analyze, back where we were before on Fields, Items, and Sets, and say List Formulas. It's going to bring up a new tab for you, and it's going to show you the formulas that you have listed. We have Calc Commissions, and that is equal to the sales amount minus cost. And if we were to have multiple of them, they would be listed here. So that is just some information for you to help keep you a little sane, because when you're on your pivot table and you're clicking on this, you may not know what's going on there. So this allows you a little bit easier to see what's going on. Likely so, we could come back in on our pivot table Analyze. We come back in, hit this down drop, and we say Calc Com, and it allows us to modify this information. It did not allow us to do it the very first time because we were just creating it. So keep that in mind. You can always go back and edit it if something is not correct with that setting. Also, while you're in your pivot table Analyze, we've showed you before where if you click on the field value, you can set the field value settings, but also you can find them up here in the ribbon on Pivot Table Analyze. So you can just click on the top there, it brings up the window, and you can go do what you need to do. Thank you all for watching as we explored a little bit deeper into what Microsoft has to offer when it comes to the pivot table. We've taken it a few steps further to show you some more that you can do to help make your life a little bit easier as you're diving into the world of Microsoft Excel in pivot tables. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you all next week.